Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. President Trump is cutting nearly half of the staff at the Department of Education, what it could mean for Illinois students, teachers, and schools. And one-on-one with Illinois Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton to talk about the challenges facing the state under the Trump administration. And now to some of today's top stories. The teenage activist whose teeth were knocked out by a Chicago police officer during the summer of 2020 will receive a $280,000 settlement after a vote from City Council today. Miracle Boyd was 18 years old at the time and planning to attend DePaul University on a scholarship. She told older people the incident derailed her life. In addition to losing a tooth and a half, she suffered nerve damage and pain and dropped out of DePaul. A WTTW News analysis shows Chicago taxpayers have spent nearly $8.7 million on lawsuits against the police department over its handling of protests that summer. Older people today also voted to reject a push that would ban the sale and distribution of fur in the city. Supporters of the bill say the measure would have been a step forward in anti-animal cruelty. But its opponents say banning the product puts furriers, people who sell furs, and entire communities in a sticky situation.
If this ordinance goes through, there will be two businesses that close their doors. That's jobs, that's sales tax. That's another example of why businesses don't want to locate in the city of Chicago.
Some cities across the U.S. and the state of California have active fur bans. The CTA is rolling out cameras to catch bus lane scofflaws. The transit agency's board of directors approved a contract today to purchase 6 AI-equipped cameras that'll rotate among bus routes in the automated bus lane enforcement pilot area, which runs from the Lake to Ashland and Roosevelt Road to North Avenue. 8 city vehicles already have cameras that scan for drivers parked in bus and bike lanes. The CTA expects to install its cameras in May or June. After a 60-day training period, warnings and tickets would start going out in July or August. Illinois is expanding its Real ID services in an effort to meet unprecedented demands before the May deadline. A Real ID supercenter opened today downtown, offering non-appointment walk-in services Monday through Friday. The Secretary of State's office also introduced Real ID Saturdays, extending hours at 6 appointment facilities and opening a dozen others exclusively for Real ID walk-in services. Beginning May 7th, you will need a Real ID to fly domestically unless you have a passport. For more on the documents you'll need, you can check out our website, WTTW.com/news. Up next, what cuts to the Department of Education could mean for students in Illinois.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
The Department of Education will soon be shrunk to half its size. The Trump administration says it plans to lay off more than 1,300 of the department's employees, which critics say is part of the president's plan to dismantle the agency. The administration says the cuts reflect the department's commitment to efficiency, but opponents say it'll put billions of dollars in education funding at risk. Joining us to discuss the potential impact on Illinois students are Paul Vallis, former Chicago Public Schools CEO, Peter Cunningham, former Assistant Secretary of Education, and Leota Scott, a professor of education at DePaul University. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Welcome back. Welcome. Let's start with your reaction to the administration's move to shutter the Department of Education. Leota Scott, I'll start with you, please.
Well, first of all, I think one of the things that struck me immediately was this notion of thinking about the states and bringing it down to the states. And really, from education from the beginning has always been connected to our democracy. And so really we need a national view of thinking of education. And to break it down to the states would be an error because we all need to have education, just as it was founded. And this goes back to pretty much the agricultural business or agricultural establishment that we thought about education as ensuring educational opportunity for every individual. And so we want to make sure that that includes those in low-income communities, those who are disenfranchised. And so bringing it down to the states, we may run the risk of losing these voices and having them not have access to education.
Peter Cunningham?
Well, I would say that the actions by the Trump administration raise one fundamental question. Is education a matter of national interest? And every president before him has agreed that it is, going back to Lincoln, who started the land-grant colleges that you were sort of talking about, to Eisenhower, to Nixon, to Reagan. They've all believed in it. And the fact is, it's still mostly controlled at the state and local level. Only about 10 to 12% comes from the feds. But the feds play a vital role in protecting the most vulnerable students. And that's, I think, what's really at risk here is the most vulnerable students.
Paul Vallis?
Well, I think there's two issues. One is the Department of Education bureaucracy itself, and then the second is the programs. And of course, to actually close the Department of Education or to get rid of those programs require a congressional action. So I think they're talking about collapsing the bureaucracy, not necessarily jettisoning the program. So we have to separate that. Secondly, look, the Department of Education has been very controversial, both on the left and the right. You recall during the Obama administration, the unions were in uproar because the Department of Education was trying to mandate the Common Core curriculum, and they started trying to dictate local curriculum, local accountability. They were tying some additional funding to that, and actually both the left and the right joined into an alliance to get legislation passed to almost checkmate the department. During the Bush administration, he used the Department of Education in a heavy-handed way to try to force districts to privatize the use of Title I dollars to hire private consulting, private tutors.
Well, you talk about collapsing the bureaucracy of the Department of Education. Peter Cunningham, isn't U.S. Ed actually one of the smallest, if not the smallest, agency of its kind, cabinet-level agency? And give us a sense also, if you would, of what the department is responsible for, briefly.
So it is the smallest agency with about 4,200 employees, or at least that's what the number was until yesterday. And what they primarily do is distribute money targeted to vulnerable populations, low-income kids, rural kids, students with disabilities, bilingual students. And what you have is a very, very small number of people whose job it is to make sure those dollars are spent in the way that Congress intended them. And they're the only ones who are making sure of that. And what they're talking about doing now is just saying, oh, let's just block grant everything and give it back to the states. But they were very explicit in the president's executive order last month that he's basically saying to the states, if you want to convert that to a voucher program, you can. And that will have consequences for people. So those dollars are not going to be as targeted as they could be.
Newly confirmed Secretary of Education Linda McMahon has said exactly that, that the intention is to send funding to the states through block grants. What might the impact be, I'm going to come back to you, Paul Vallis, if block grants are smaller than what the state or the school districts are budgeting for?
Well, again, that's a separate issue. Are they going to reduce block grants? Are they going to reduce the Title I funds? That's a separate issue than, in effect, reducing the size of the U.S. Department of Education. Look, prior to the creation of the U.S. Department of Education, the grant programs were handled by then Health, Education, and Welfare. And of course, when it came to equal rights and things like that, advocacies on student rights, on parental rights, that was done through the Justice Department. And of course, the student loan program, the infamously managed student loan program, could easily be handled through the Treasury Department. So, at the end of the day, I'm not making a value. I'm kind of agnostic on whether or not you have a department. One might argue that if you're fearful of what Trump might do, you might be more fearful of a Department of Education that is obviously run by Trump appointees, because the department has been intrusive in the past. I mentioned the Bush administration.
That the workload then could be distributed, and some of that workload is, of course, distributing funds. You're saying that could be farmed out to various other departments. But Leotis, Scott, I want to come back to you. Are you concerned, because this is something you've mentioned, about inequities being furthered without a Department of Education overseeing all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even thinking about the thought of education, even the student loans, to Paul's point, going into another department would be a fundamental misunderstanding of what education is. Because education was more of an investment towards those students and not more of a sense of a loan or any other type of way in which we think of it. So if we have to think back of the investment part of the loans and why we did it in the first place.
Well, let me respond. Title I is Title I. Congress
And
tells
of course,
you.
so our viewers know those
Right.
Title I dollars
It's
are
the
for,
poverty dollars.
yes,
and the
for
special
low-income
dollars. And
schools.
then the legislature tells you how to spend that money. It's the same thing with the student loan program. The problem is, and I'm just saying the criticism of the department is they've gone in and they've done their own rulemaking. For example, during Race to the Top, they tried to spin off some money and allocate that money to the schools based on whether or not they were going to comply with the federal mandates. I know we all participated in Race to the Top sweepstakes. Bush administration tried to challenge our use of our Title I money because they wanted us to use our Title I money or a portion of it to hire private tutorial firms to provide intervention services. So even during the Biden administration, if you remember, look at how they allocated the COVID money. They totally discriminated against both charter schools and private schools in the allocation of COVID funds.
And so you mentioned Title I dollars because according to the University of Michigan's Poverty Solutions for the 2020-21 school year, so several years ago, we admit, Illinois received about $645 million in Title I funding, which, as we said, supports programming for low-income schools. CPS received about 262, almost 263. Leota Scott, how could, if funding like that is cut, if it's impacted, what is the impact on low income, and particularly Black and brown students in Chicago?
Yeah, we have to go back to access. It's having equal opportunity, equal educational opportunity for everyone, every individual. And so that's what we missed by doing that. One thing I want to say to your point even about the Department of Education, Paul, was that Department of Education is more than just elementary and secondary education. It also includes post-secondary education. It also includes career, technical, and adult education. And this speaks to how education is multi-generational. It includes everyone. And I think sometimes when we have this conversation and we just talk about it
Absolutely.
in the K-12 context, I think we miss a lot about the role that education plays. Going back to my point, tied to democracy, it's connected together, and that's how we think of it in American context.
And I agree.
I'd like to add something also. You know, when the Department of Education started in 1979, 19% of Americans had college degrees. Today, 38% have them. People tend to just talk about the test scores and that they're the same, and that's why the reason why they haven't gone up, maybe one reason is because the kids themselves are still coping with the same root causes that caused it. You know, they don't have the preschool, they don't have the support at home, they don't have what it takes. But when you look at the college attainment level, that's a serious improvement. The same thing with the high school graduation level. So
the Illinois, I want to get
out.
to this, and everybody's going to get in. We've got a couple minutes left. So the Illinois State Board of Education says that so far they have received no formal communication or guidance from the Department of Ed on this. A statement from a spokesperson reads, quote, "This is the extent of the information ISB has available at the moment," which is not much. And it is deeply concerned about the potential implications. ISB will be seeking clarity from senior officials at the U.S. Department of Education to help give families and students information they deserve to know about the $3.56 billion in federal funding we expect to receive in fiscal year 2025. Peter Cunningham, I want to come back to you because we talked about, issues with other departments absorbing the work of Ed. What are your concerns with that?
Well, my concerns is that it's just moving the deck chairs around, that instead of dealing with one central agency that deals with education, school districts and states now have to deal with justice on civil rights issues.
Well, and the department also oversees civil rights complaints.
The department oversees civil rights right now, and now it's just going to be one of many priorities in the Justice Department. And they'll have to go to Treasury on student loans, and they'll have to go to HHS for Title I, and they'll have to go to labor for workforce stuff. And I don't see what the point is if they're just moving it around to other agencies. Why is that better? It's not at all clear why that's any better.
And I think my response in terms of the criticism, again, I'm agnostic whether or not you have a department, is the fact that the department, under successive administrations, has gone far beyond the legislative mandates, and they've literally legislated themselves through their rulemaking. And they did it in Race to the Top. They did it in practically every single education initiative. And let me tell you, the record on higher ed is not the most stellar record.
You're going to have to tell them next time we have this conversation because we are out of time, gentlemen. I thank you all for joining me, and I welcome you back for further discussion. Paul Vallis, Peter Cunningham, and Leota Scott. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Up next, a one-on-one conversation with the Lieutenant Governor of Illinois. Illinois is facing challenges in the still early days of President Donald Trump's second term, and the state is pushing back. Democratic officials are sounding the alarm and, in some cases, filing legal challenges about the president's flurry of executive orders and policy changes. Joining us now with more on how the state is responding is Juliana Stratton, Lieutenant Governor of Illinois. Lieutenant Governor, welcome to Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with getting your take on some of the news of the day, actually. Your reaction to the Department of Education beginning to shutter, laying off pretty much the entire staff in the regional office that's based in Chicago. What's the impact going to be on black and brown children in Illinois?
Well, when you think about the U.S. Department of Education, and by the way, this really doesn't come as a surprise. Donald Trump has always talked about trying to dismantle this department, and we see this as something that is an attack on public education, and it's certainly going to have a tremendous negative impact on black and brown children all across the country. Title I funds, which really focus on students that are from the lowest income communities, students who need more resources, who are already in under-resourced schools, they're going to be impacted. Students who have 504 plans or IEPs, students with disabilities who need additional resources, they're going to be impacted. So this is going to impact our students across Illinois as well as America. It's going to impact our teachers and educators and all of the staff. And it's going to have devastating impacts on the education system.
Another issue that the Trump administration has come for in schools and in other sectors is, of course, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Why do you think this has become such a target?
It's become a target because Donald Trump and his cronies want to pit people against one another, and that is really the goal. So that we can't focus on what they are really doing in Washington, which is really trying to enrich themselves and empower themselves. Government should really be about making people's lives better, and that's what Donald Trump said he was going to do, but it's been nothing but broken promises to working families all across this nation. Look, here in Illinois, we believe that our diversity is our strength, and we've been very bold about saying it's important to make sure that we continue to be inclusive and create opportunities that can help level the playing field. But Donald Trump and Elon Musk and others in the White House want to pit people against each other and make people feel like they don't belong, and we're not going to stand for it.
Many top Democrats in Washington have said they want to find ways to work with the Trump administration, but you've said this is not the time to pick and choose our battles. How do we get stuff accomplished like that, and do the Democrats need to be more aligned in their approach?
Well, clearly, Donald Trump is not interested in getting things done or making any progress on behalf of working families. We are seeing that. I mean, slashing tens of thousands of jobs, threatening to take away health care. He promised that he was going to lower prices. We're not seeing that happen. Instead, we're seeing prices go up, in fact. Picking fights with our allies, that's going to cost through these purported trade wars. It's going to cost American families about $1,200 per family. I mean, clearly there is no intent to try to make progress and get things done by this administration. So what we need to do is we need to keep speaking to working families of America. We need to keep talking about the issues that really matter to them, how to make things more affordable for them. Those are the issues that we're focused on. And in fact, when we look at what the key issues that people are concerned about, according to polling, it's prices and how to make sure the prices can come down. We're seeing costs go up because of Donald Trump. In Illinois, we did things like eliminate the grocery tax. That's going to help families. We raised the minimum wage. That's going to help families. So we're going to keep doing what we do here in Illinois under the Pritzker-Stratton administration, and that's making sure that we're listening to working families, speaking to their issues, and making sure that we get things done on their behalf.
And you mentioned the grocery tax. That's 1 cent per $100 of groceries. So that ends up being about $1 if you buy $100 worth of groceries.
And also raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, which when we came into office, I think it was $7.75 or $8.75. So over the years, we raised the minimum wage. So when you're putting money back into the pockets of working families, all of it matters. Trust me, as we're seeing grocery prices go up, they're going to be glad that that grocery tax was eliminated.
This year, you've launched your own political action committee called Level Up. There's been speculation about whether Senator Dick Durbin will run for re-election. Also speculation about your boss, Governor Pritzker, and whether or not he has a higher office in his eye. Given all that's happening in Washington right now, if Senator Durbin does retire, are you considering a run for Senate?
Well, first of all, let me just say I consider Senator Durbin to be a real champion for working families across our state, and he should decide on his own timeline what he wants to do and when he wants to do it. He has been somebody who has been a great friend, and certainly I will respect him in that space. What I will say is, just like any elected official, I'm always evaluating where I can best serve the people of Illinois and how I can make an impact, and I'll continue to do that. But right now, I love my job as Lieutenant Governor and hope to keep doing it as long as I can.
How would you say the Pritzker-Stratton administration is responding to the actions of the Trump administration and their impact on Illinoisans?
Well, we're responding boldly. We're responding directly. Both the governor and I have made it a point to use our bully pulpits to make sure that the people of Illinois know that we are going to stand with them, stand for them, and we're going to fight against anything that threatens their well-being. We have been vocal. You've seen the governor. He's been out there talking about it. I've been out there talking about it. And I think the other thing besides just talking is we've been making real progress on behalf of people. I mentioned what we've done to address, rising costs. We've also, look at what's happening out of Washington with threatening to, through this, congressional Republicans and Donald Trump, threatening Medicaid. I mean, who would take away health care from our most vulnerable Americans? But here in Illinois, what we're doing is we're eliminating medical debt and we're making health care more affordable for people. So again, we're showing the contrast between the Pritzker-Stratton administration and the chaos we're seeing in Washington.
That said, 2.4 million Illinoisans, so 43.8% of voters, they did cast their ballot for Donald Trump in the 2024 election. What does that signal to you, and how are you and the governor reaching them as well?
Well, what it signals to me is that people bought into the lies that Donald Trump put forth and what he said he was promising. He said he'd be a champion for working families, that on day one he was going to get to work and help life get better for working families, and he's done the exact opposite. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're getting our message out to all voters, because remember, when health care is stripped away, it's going to include people who voted for Donald Trump. When the prices of eggs go up, as they have, it means that the people who voted for Donald Trump are also going to pay more. And when we look at jobs that have been slashed, tens of thousands of dedicated public servants, including veterans, by the way, who have lost their jobs, those are going to be people in our rural communities, our suburban communities, and urban communities. So these issues are now touching everyone. They're going to feel the pain, and we as Democrats need to continue showing that we're making progress to make their lives better, and unfortunately, Donald Trump is not.
Before we let you go, Lieutenant Governor, last year, former Vice President Kamala Harris lost her bid for President to Donald Trump, of course. What do you think that signals to black women in politics and women of color?
Well, I mean, I think she was a wonderful candidate and did everything she could. I mean, there was nothing that she did wrong from my estimation. It was a very challenging circumstance to try to run a presidential race within 107 days, but look what she was able to do during that time and motivate so many. It wasn't the outcome that I hoped for and many others hoped for. But what I would say is that she was an example of what you can do. The day after she after Election Day, it was a morning that I woke up saying, is this a moment where we take our ball and go home, or is it a time that we lean in and get back to work? And my choice was to get back to work and to keep focused, and Level Up PAC is an example of why. That's my declaration that there's more to do. And while we did not, weren't successful in that moment, we're inspired to keep going, and that's how we'll make real progress.
Okay, lots to talk about. We did not get to your birth equity initiative. We'll do that next time you join us. Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we're back right after this. And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Stay connected with our reporters and what they're working on by following us on Instagram at WTTW Chicago. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. We'll hear more about this week's lunar eclipse, the blood moon, which will be visible tomorrow evening. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to give back to its community in Chicago and beyond.